I am smiling. That is a smile.
Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted episode 52. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert.
I'm the smiling Gavin Ashenden.
First of all, thank you again to all those of you who have visited our website, taken a look at our blog, looked at our membership options and joined us and supported us. So thank you. Please continue to do so. Please like, share and subscribe. And I think we'll ask you especially to share this episode with those who may not be familiar with Catholic Unscripted, because we want to talk through in a moment some of the potential changes to the law surrounding abortion in the UK, which is in the public domain, but not enough people really know about it. So do please share the video with those that you think may need to know this. But to begin with, Mark, can you just pull up on the screen there? We wanted to draw your attention to the 40 Days for Life in Leicester, which is beginning on Ash Wednesday, February the 14th. And you can see all the details there. So you could visit the website, www.40daysforlife.com, and find out a bit more and see how you can sign up. So you might want to visit the website and sign up to take part in 40 days of prayer for the unborn. Speaking of which, at the end of last year, in December 2023, we became aware of the news that Stella Creasy MP, she's a Labour MP over here in the UK, had tabled amendments, her and Dame Diana Johnson, to the criminal justice bill that would remove offences that make it illegal for a woman to perform a self-abortion at any point right through to birth. So if you're not familiar with what's happened or what's changed over here in the UK, in 20, when was COVID now? 21 into 22, yeah, 20 into 21, 20, yeah. Around the time of COVID, when everything had shut down, there was an agreement that pills to induce an abortion could be sent home, where ordinarily a woman would have had to go to a clinic and be assessed. And so then at a later time, after all the lockdowns had been lifted, there was a vote to keep this in place. So the law as it stands is that women can order these pills to take at home. However, there are restrictions in that they are meant to be issued for women no later in gestation than 10 weeks. So what we saw with, there we are. And there's the story from The Guardian, I think. Is that Mark?
Yeah, that's Stella Creasy writing in The Guardian about this.
Yeah. So Stella Creasy says, scrap this unjust law. So let's look at what she's talking about. As a result of this, there was a couple of stories which you may have heard about of women who ordered these pills at home and then took them, but they were further along than they had said. So they had lied to the clinics for whatever reason that might be. And these pills were delivered and they induced an abortion at home and terminated the pregnancy of their child. These women, under the existing law, would be arrested for a crime under the criminal justice bill. And there's another bill. Let's have a look. Section 60. Sorry, this is Section 60 of the Offences Against the Person Act, which currently says that a dead newborn baby, has to be reported. And Stella Creasy's amendments to this bill would include the removal of Section 60, which is used to make it illegal to hide the body of a dead newborn baby. This is really drastic. The UK currently has some of the most extreme laws anyway around this issue. And this is a push to make it even less stringent. Now, you see from that article that the abortion lobby are trying to present it rather as a compassionate move. Apparently, there's been a couple of cases where some women have miscarried and then been investigated by the police, miscarried at a late stage under these laws, and been investigated because there may have been some suspicion that they had in fact induced an abortion after what is the legal 24 weeks. So in the UK, the law currently stands since 1967 that you're allowed an abortion up to 24 weeks gestation. And Stella Creasy's amendments to the Criminal Justice Bill are calling for both the removal of that for women who perform self-abortions at home. In other words, those women can then not be arrested if it turns out that they have ordered these pills and taken these pills at 32 weeks or 36 weeks or 38 weeks or any week after 24, they can then not be arrested. It's no longer a criminal offence. Stella Creasy's amendment goes even further and says that the healthcare profession, it should be completely decriminalised, which means that the healthcare profession also wouldn't face prosecution if they were to do a late-term abortion. Now, what are the implications of that? Because what we hear from the abortion lobby are this is compassionate, this is kind, this is an archaic law, this has to be thrown out. What about these poor women? If we think about it, in fact, what it's doing, what it proposes, pushes us back to a situation which is sort of creating another case of backstreet abortions, because it's not beyond the wit of man to imagine that there might be some women who find themselves at 32 weeks pregnant, boyfriend's left you, got a new boyfriend, he puts you under pressure to get rid of the baby, you order abortion pills, you lie to the provider, you take the abortion pills, you're taking them long past the time that you're meant to take them, some terrible complications occur, the mother becomes unwell. In some extreme cases, the baby might even be born alive. Consider that. The baby might be born alive. What then? This is not a crime. If that removal of Section 60 of the Offences Against the Person Act is removed, that baby could theoretically be placed into a bin, left to die, placed into a bin, or buried in a back garden, perfectly legally. There would be no requirement to report the birth of this baby. It's not even considered a birth. The mother, now picture the scene, the mother is in a terrible state, having taken these pills and needs medical help. She won't be prosecuted for what she's done. So she then is rushed to hospital and treated in hospital. And the medical profession then will be, after a time, under pressure to say, well, look, this is already happening. These women are in a terrible state at home, ordering these abortion pills. They're lying to us and they're taking them after 24 weeks. We really have to allow them abortion up to birth in a safe and, in a safe medical environment. We have to, because look what they're doing at home. So the knock-on of this, the slippery slope of this, is that as soon as it was allowed, these abortion pills at home, then as soon as you take away the ability to prosecute women who deceive abortion providers, then it inevitably brings us to the end point, which is going to be allow abortion legally up to birth and provided for by your healthcare provider. This is the way it's going. And there is no interest. There is actually, the research shows there is no interest for this extreme level of for abortion up to birth, and yet this is what these amendments will achieve. Now, MPs are voting on this quite soon, as far as I know, and I think that, as far as I know as well, this is considered to be a free vote. So which is ridiculous, because it's down to the it becomes a conscience vote. Well, you wouldn't say that about something like cannibalism. Hey, let's vote on cannibalism and make it a free vote. Why is it that something like this, that could result in, and very likely would result in, to take it to the extreme, what I have said, which is babies buried, discarded, almost close to birth, to natural birth, without any legal obligations or barriers, women left untreated, back to the backstreet abortion situation, all because we're told this is kind and compassionate. Some women don't want to keep their babies and they're in a terrible position after 24 weeks. So it's less questions and more just, what are we to make of this? I think one of the things is, please, if you're in the UK, contact your MP. What do you make of it, Mark?
I think that at the root of this is about the dignity of the human person. That's what sort of strikes me about it. Obviously, it's the narrative that they seem to be using is this abortionist healthcare narrative that is very prevalent now. But so it's really interesting because it's using language. It's the way that we frame these things, the language we use to frame these things, often is something that's used to manipulate the emotions that surround it and the way that people react to it. So, and it always seems to be a softening of the process, of what is actually going on. That's what they're trying to achieve, to sort of generate empathy or, sympathy for the people who find themselves in that position. But and reading like Stella Creasy's argument, she's saying that because this is a healthcare procedure, there shouldn't be a criminal element to it. And it seems to me it's like anything healthcare has got no moral dimension. Or like that seems to be what she's saying. Would you agree? Is that what she's saying? Seems bonkers if it is.
I think so, but abortion isn't healthcare anyway. To frame it as healthcare, and then she says anything healthcare, is fine. That's part of the problem in the first place. Framing it like that, as you say, the dignity of the human person, and also what we have in this framing is this is archaic, this is out of date. One woman said, and I can't remember her name, Jackie someone I think, said this law is older than I am, and she's 55. She's 55 years old, as if the age of the law has anything to do with the morality of the law. I mean, the 10 Commandments were written reasonably long ago, long before Jackie, and it says do not kill. I'm sure Jackie would agree. Well, I was just about to say, I'm sure Jackie would agree that still stands. Although if people are calling for abortion up to birth, it's hard to know if they even would accept that anymore.
It's okay to kill some people in some circumstances. Basically, that's what pro-abortion fundamentally has to be. That position, yeah. It's so difficult because of this idea that it's progress. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's like whose life is valuable. It's a choice between this life or that life, but they're both valuable lives. And actually, from the moment of conception, this human life. So people who say it's because we care and we're compassionate. First of all, this change to the law, it's very hard to see how this aids women. How does this help women? Can we not foresee, as we have foreseen the introduction of laws surrounding euthanasia, and as we have foreseen the introduction of laws surrounding surrogacy, all put forward with the same argument, this is a kind and compassionate thing to do. What about the loving couple, a poor young woman who's had her womb removed because of some terrible illness, and shouldn't she be able to have a child? Let's allow surrogacy. How does it end? It ends with two gay men renting out the womb of a woman and discarding her as a mother. And raising a child purposefully, not adopting a child, but purposefully raising a child and creating a child as a commodity. That's where it ends. How does euthanasia end? It starts with the hard case of the poor 85-year-old person suffering terribly with a terminal illness. They're going to die in a couple of weeks, and we just want to ease them through this easy death. Yeah, that's where does it end? It ends now in Canada with talks about discussions about minors being able to choose death. It ends with poor people realising that a choice for euthanasia is going to be cheaper and there'll be less of a burden on the state. That's where this ends. And this is the same thing. And it can be presented as compassionate and kind and nice. But the truth is, if we it goes back again to the things we've said over and over again. If we elevate kindness, niceness above what is true and what is good first, it's only going to end in disaster. So this is not good for women. This is not good for women. Contraception is not good for women. Abortion is not good for women. You can see human traffickers, women getting abortion, women getting pregnant in prostitution, getting abortion pills, get rid of the baby, bury it outside, get her back to work. Where, how is that good for women who are bullied and cajoled? It's simply not. It's absolutely outrageous. Sorry to rant, Gavin.
I want to go back. I think we allowed ourselves to be propagandized, and what propaganda does is it stops us thinking. We've given up too much ground already conceptually, and I think one of the things I hope that the Catholic community and the wider Christian community might do is to try and regain some philosophical confidence. So if we go back to what you were saying a moment ago, quoting the Ten Commandments, if I can be pedantic for a moment, one of the things I discovered when I learned a little bit of Hebrew was that the commandment is thou shalt not murder, not thou shalt not kill. This is very important because there are circumstances in which killing takes place in the Bible and in our lives, but murder is a very different thing. And what we should be talking about is the murdering of the child in the womb. So this is murder. One of the reasons it's murder is because a child is a sentient being. Our society is trying to do everything it can to stop that message going through, including recently criminalizing a rather sweet elderly man who stood outside a clinic with a verse from Psalm 139, which talks about the way in which the child in the womb is loved by God. But what I think we've lost, the way in which we've lost the plot and lost the argument, is that we've given way on this primary insight the Christian community has, from which all human rights derive. So it matters very much, which is the sacredness of the human person. And as Catherine was saying, the argument for compassion has been produced, but because we've been propagandized and we think in a sloppy way, compassion for one person can actually be cruelty for somebody else. And that's what's happening here. So-called compassion for the mother is cruelty because it ends up for the murdered child. I was listening to Jonathan Pageray the other day, and I thought he was really quite helpful theologically because he was talking about modern Satanism. So don't freak out too much. Just let me give the argument. What he was suggesting was that there's a growth of secular Satanism, and he was trying to explain it psychologically and theologically, and essentially saying that the figure of Satan is the emblematic figure for rebellion against constraint. So the constraint comes from the love of God, the fact that we are contingent creatures. God has made us and he constrains us with his compassion and his love. And if you like, the spiritual genesis of Satanism is a rebellion against that constraint. And the de-Christianization of society is an act of Satanism in the sense that it's driven by a constant motivation to rebel against the constraints that keep us safe. And whilst I don't suggest that we call our opponents Satanists, I think that one of the things we have to do is to be clearer about the moral evil that lies behind some of these so-called compassionate movements. And what we need to do particularly is to say that the human being is sacred. The reason we don't take life is we can't make it. We can never replace a life that we've taken. And that at the bottom level is the moral reason why we should be very careful how we manage life. But this anti-God, anti-creationist, anti-constraint philosophy we're surrounded by involves a constant dehumanization of people so that, as Catherine was saying, either at euthanasia or in the discarding of children right up to the moment of birth, their humanity is ignored. So essentially what we're offering, what this modern philosophy is offering is freedom of choice, supposedly compassionate, against the murder of the vulnerable. Not compassionate. And that's one of the reasons why we have to speak out against it. The difficulty is we've been propagandized. So almost everyone in our society is terrified against speaking out against the choices of the mother, because they've been set in a new they've become the new sanctification. Freedom of choice is the new holiness, but actually freedom of choice is not the new holiness. Sanctification ought to be directed primarily at human life. And the issue of choice is how we find our way into life-giving choices rather than death-dealing choices. So we have to change the language and we have to change the way in which we talk to society. And it's not enough to be seen as people trying to restrict the choice of mothers. We have to begin by recasting the dialogue with society in the way I've suggested, I think. And to do that, you have to be faithful. You have to accept the incarnation. Everything flows back to the incarnation, when God became human and we discovered that human beings in particular were sacred people he came to save.
Yeah, I think that's the key, isn't it? Is we have come so far from where we were. We have fallen so far away from any idea of ourselves as the divine, an image of the divine, image and likeness of the divine. We no longer really seem to stop to think, what is freedom for? Why are we free? What do we have freedom for? And instead, we do something simply because we can. We see it in the world of technology. We see it in the realm of our actions, our behaviours. Is just because we can, we'll do it. And then we see the consequences of that. So as you say, we've stopped thinking, we're propagandized. We just accept this is just a given. You're free. Why are you free? To do what you want. That's never going to be the answer. That's never going to be how you flourish, how society coheses, how families stay together. That's never going to be the answer. What that will do is what we're seeing, which is fragmented individualism, doing what you want and ending up completely lost and in a gutter. It's not the path to happiness, that's for sure. So to say do what you want will make you happy, it demonstrably is not true. Thank you for correcting me on kill and murder. As I said it, I thought, of course, it isn't do not kill, it is do not murder. But you also talked about Satan and the demonic, and whenever we might mention the demonic or Satan, you sort of said, stick with me, because we know that there are some people who will eye roll or turn away and say, oh no, this is getting ridiculous. First of all, it's not at all ridiculous. As for Satanism, it doesn't have to be this dressing in black, Ouija boards, like devils with horns. That I think the thing is, Satan and the demonic can get in when we leave ourselves open. We don't even need to be dabbling necessarily in occult practices, although some people are doing that. But I think just we've left ourselves vulnerable. And one of the ways in which we've left ourselves vulnerable is that we are no longer worshipping Christ. We're no longer a Christian country. We're going to the gym on Sunday mornings and doing yoga, and we're not actually worshipping Christ. So we're not ordered properly. So, of course, Satan can get a foothold. It doesn't mean you're doing some dark shenanigans in a basement with cloaks on. And so we are so far removed that we see this as normal. This is not normal. Killing your baby, your own baby, in your own womb is not normal. It is not good. It is murder. It is a human person. It is alive. It is growing into a human person. And the only thing that will stop it is if you rip it to shreds in your womb. That's not that. To accept this is not normal. And it is. How is it different from the Aztecs sacrificing, bringing kids up onto, a rock and plunging into their chest and ripping their hearts out and offering it to the sun to appease the sun god? You're just killing these babies on a massive scale, and it's satanic. That's what
I think the reason I wanted to introduce that was I thought that what Pajot was doing was very helpfully reintroducing the concept of the struggle between good and evil by reintroducing the labels. And so he was saying that modern day Satanists don't all dress up, just as Catherine was saying, in all the gear. That isn't the point. It's an attitude that challenges authority. And I think the reason it's important is because if it's left unchecked, it leads to the kind of thing that happened at Auschwitz. What happened at Auschwitz was, to my mind, one of the greatest exemplars of the outworking of evil within the constraints of the human will. As a teenager, it was quite clear to me that this wasn't something people could do on their own. Children can be cruel, they can hurt each other, they can damage each other. We can be very, very careless and mean to one another. But the systematic eradication of women and children by gassing them and then I mean, this was on a scale of 6 million. And I think one of the things that upset me a great deal about the whole episode in the Middle East that's become recently was the way in which the Islamic calls for compassionate justice for Gaza and the Palestinians were accepted so very quickly by our society as the justification for the ethnic cleansing of the Jews, not just the appalling murders, which were celebrated with a level of satanic glee by the murderers. But then again, once we're back to the Holocaust, the justification from the river to the sea, not that they knew which river and which sea even, of the complete eradication of a people. This isn't just bad politics. This isn't careless morality. This is profoundly and deeply evil. And I think one of the things I want to see is the church regaining a proportionate sense of the moral struggle that we're in, which is not just between good and bad people, but a cosmic struggle between good and evil, in which we are the agents, and we have to choose good, and we have to combat evil. And so, as you were both saying, it's not enough just to stand by. We actually have to reconfigure the way the language and the fight is taken in our society, and engage politically and philosophically with the distortion of ideas that allows evil free reign.
Yeah, we do that. We need to do that. Most of all, we need to pray, which is why I would encourage you to visit that 40 Days for Life website and take a look. Mark, Gavin said there we need to combat evil. How do we do that?
Well, by living holy lives, I would have thought would probably be the best way that we can do it. By conforming ourselves to Christ would be another way of explaining it. And I think that it's a lifelong journey. It's something that we have to focus on the good, the true, and the beautiful, and head in that direction. Always be looking at those, what shows us the good, the true, and the beautiful, and try to emulate and focus on that.
Yeah, and I want to use that as an opportunity to big up confession again, because, of course, Jesus in, devil out, Jesus in, Satan out. We can say that in our own heads as we approach to receive Jesus in the Eucharist, but we need to receive, recognizing the gift that we're receiving. We need to receive in a state of grace, and I think we have become casual as we approach for Holy Communion. As we approach to receive Christ in body, blood, soul, and divinity in communion, and that, we if we look at the Last Supper when Judas received that, there's a one of you is going to quote scripture in a minute. There's a little quote that says about the enemy, and he can get in because he wasn't really receiving in the right state. I think it's worth pointing out that we have to prepare ourselves for Mass. We have to take seriously the preparation for Mass and the significance of what's happening at Mass, and not just receive Jesus as a little token. Once I've got Jesus, I'm going to go off and it's relational, isn't it? Something is called from us that we have to do before we receive. Wouldn't you say, Mark?
Yeah, I think that it's part of the practice. It's something that you learn as you go along, isn't it? It's when your faith is active, instead of just being a passive, participant in. And it fascinates me that so many people go to Mass like that and don't actually. They just sort of line up or whatever and go up to receive the Blessed Sacrament. But when it's more active in you and you're trying to work on yourself, then that's the sort of prayer that you make, that you're going to Mass and that it will change your experience and the way that you behave if you prepare yourself for Holy Communion properly, if you're going in a state of grace, if you're preparing yourself in prayer before you go up and receive. And the more, it's lex orandi, lex credendi, lex vivendi, the more, that you pray in the right way, the more we become what we worship.
John's Gospel, Jesus then answered, "That man is the one for whom I shall dip the piece of bread and give it to him." So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he took and gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot.
And then
After
Satan
this, Satan
entered.
then entered him. Therefore, Jesus said to him, what you are going to do it quickly. So, yeah, that life of faith. But that brings us quite neatly to something else we wanted to talk about, Mark and Gavin, which is the way in which so many young people come into parishes today to attend classes to prepare them for confirmation. And yet, there's no evangelization. Many of the young people coming into parishes, they'll turn up. There might be a good number. It might be 40, 50 or more in some parishes. And when asked, why are you here to make your confirmation? There's a lot of mumbling. There's a lot of giggling. And then it's, my mum made me do it. Very, very few will say anything along the lines of, say, their reasons related to their relationship with Christ and deepening their relationship with Christ and the gifts and the fruits of the Holy Spirit. And this, so this is a problem, because what are we actually doing then when we're this is such a brilliant opportunity for evangelization. We have tens of young people coming in their mid-teens to attend confirmation classes, and we are often telling them about the saints so that they can choose a saint's name, reminding them what to say in confession. But some of them don't even believe in God. And some of them have so many basic questions that it seems like we're starting here when they really need to be addressed here. So I feel like confirmation classes are often a completely wasted opportunity. And my worry is that what happens is they then go through their confirmation and then they never come back to Mass, just like they went through their first communion and to get into a Catholic school, and then they haven't been back to Mass since. And what we find is some of the stuff that Sherry Waddell wrote about in her book, Forming Intentional Disciples. She says that in the Pew studies that were done, we've heard about the nuns, the NONEs, who are unaffiliated. And it's really interesting, some of the stuff that she has found in that. Of the unaffiliated, those who say they're unaffiliated, quite a large number would call themselves religious unaffiliated rather than secular unaffiliated. And that is, they say that religion is important to them, or even very important, but they don't identify with any particular religious tradition. They believe in God. They even believe in a personal God. They might even, very oddly, attend a religious congregation, and yet they still say they call themselves non or unaffiliated. They might believe in miracles. They might even pray. Something else very interesting. She said, it's surprising that those who self-identified as Catholics and those who identified as religiously unaffiliated respondents in the study were more similar in their responses to any other pair of faith groups, and that the number of former Catholics is so high that it's likely many of these nuns that coming into Mass are those former Catholics who retain some kind of idiosyncratic mix of Catholic and non-Catholic beliefs and practices. In other words, there is such an opportunity here where we have adults floating around, spiritual seekers, wandering in and out of churches, even going to receive communion, but they don't really, they're not Catholic, they're not affiliated. And it probably goes back to the problems that are still going on, which is they weren't properly catechized. They went to confirmation classes, as I've said, and they were told about St. Joan of Arc and St. Michael and which one do you want to pick as your saint's name. But they don't know, they can't really talk about their own relationship with Christ or even say they believe in God. So how do we reach the youth? What's going wrong? And what do we need to do? Solve the problems. Gavin Ashenden.
Well, it's a cycle, isn't it? I mean, you can start almost anywhere in the cycle. I could terrify you with stories of my confirmation class in a small medieval chapel in the eaves of Canterbury Cathedral, where the requirement was you had to wear what we used to call a jock strap, a sports supporter on your head. the person teaching, the elderly priest teaching us was very badly sighted, and he'd suddenly discovered that one of the boys had this funny thing on his head, and then when he began to focus, you could take it off, and there was kind of pass the parcel, and whoever got it then had to put it on their head. So you couldn't have had worse confirmation classes than mine. One of the obvious ways of trying to break into the cycle, I think, is with parents. If parents if they're not praying over their lovemaking and the conception of their child, and they're not praying over the child as it's born, and teaching the child to pray as it enters family life, meals, bedtime, and everything, then the child isn't going to have a living relationship with Jesus, and it's not going to understand what happens in the church. So this isn't the priest's fault or the diocese's fault; it's the parents' fault. But how do you get to the parents? We have this wonderful family in my little parish, a couple with 5 boys and 2 girls, all under the ages of about 13. They have them. You can see they have a vibrant faith. It's just the way they are. They've been brought up to love Jesus. They all receive on the their children receive on the tongue. So it's all about conversion, and you can't just deal with the children separate from the lives of their families and their parents, I think. As a non-Catholic, one of the things we did was to laugh at Catholicism and say it's very good at making saints, but the very strength of its sacramental life is almost inimical to conversion, because people enter, if you like, the system of the ritual. And people can live within the system of the ritual of Catholicism without ever giving this personal assent, even though people say to them, do this, do that, love God, say your prayers. In the end, everyone, this combination of grace and personal assent. And I think within the human cycle of life, from having babies to being prepared to death, we're constantly faced with, if you like, the support and the graces and the sacraments of the church needing to be accompanied by personal consent. And that's why evangelism needs to take place right the way through the whole of life. There should be no end to the evangelistic cycle. We have to try and break into everyone's life at some point. That's what the gospel does.
I think you're quite right to point to the parents, because what often happens, it happens in Catholic schools and in parishes, is that the young people are presented and told, can you sort them out? Can you, as if you can do something in 6 weeks that the parents haven't been able to do for 15 years. And it's bizarre, really. It's like this cultural. I have a relative, a Polish woman, who said, oh no, my son's got to be a Catholic. And I said, well, what if he doesn't want to be? He's doing Bible study elsewhere. And she said, oh, it doesn't matter. He's got to be a Catholic. And it's this sort of, well, it's just, that's what we do. That's what we've always done. It's what's happening in Ireland now. My Irish family, all their kids have First Holy Communion. The girl wears a nice little dress, and it's just cultural. It's cultural Catholicism. Who was it? Archbishop Gomez said Jesus Christ did not come to suffer and die so that he could make cultural Catholics. I think what tends to happen in parishes is you come up with some kind of course, you deliver the course, and then you assume they're ready.
No, actually, I did, in a way, I didn't agree with you, but not you're wrong. It's just that I spent 40 years having this conversation in Anglicanism. And we would argue endlessly over what the best age for the child was, how you discovered they were ready. The really critical thing is what happens after confirmation. There's no, to take my confirmation, which I meant very seriously, but if they stop going to Mass, then the whole thing is not a waste of time, but it aborts, it stops. It's not so much are they ready, but are they committed to continuing the journey?
Right, but frankly, how do you know if they're committed to continuing the journey?
I don't think you do. I think what you have to do in terms of preparation, when people come and say, I want my children to be confirmed, you say, fine, but this is the beginning of a lifetime of Mass going, which will continue after confirmation. So we need to hear from you that they're going to continue coming to Mass after confirmation.
Well, and then one of the things that is true, but okay, do you promise to go to Mass? Well, you could promise to go to Mass every week, and it might not mean that you have any relationship with Christ. It might not mean that you're ready.
What we need to do is to heal the schism of the Reformation. I hope Mark will come in now and talk about the way that Baptists do Bible studies, because one of the things that Catholics are not very good at is matching the formal graces that come to us liturgically with a level of personal engagement with the Scriptures and with Jesus. And the trouble is the Baptists don't get the grace and the sacraments. They're very good with the Bible, but neither are enough. We have to have this composite enabling both formally, sacramentally, and liturgically, and then privately and spiritually through Scripture. And one of the real tragedies of the Reformation is we produce a church, each of which, if you like, does half, but we have to have the whole.
That's kind of what I'm asking. I'm saying what could be done differently, and you've just said we could, spend time looking at the Bible, looking at Scripture, doing some of that study. That could be different, because at the moment, many of the classes are working off the assumption that the kids already know the Bible, they already did their first communion, they already understand the Mass, they already know what a saint is, they already know what their purpose in life is, they already know where they came from and where they're going to, and they may not know any of that. Mark, how do you know what could be done differently to ensure that a young person is ready for confirmation and not just coerced and is ticking boxes?
Well, as you know, I did this in my parish for about 15 years. I was the confirmation catechist, and in the end, I had to sort of step aside because you sort of suffer burnout a little bit. But for those 15 years, I wrote my own program. When I came in, we were doing the same program as you've just experienced. So we're talking about this because you're going through it now firsthand with your children. And that was the same sort of experience that I had, where you had one of those lovely books that's got learn, the gifts of the Holy Spirit or whatever in it. And that's one like that sort of thing, colouring this picture or whatever. And the kids, you could tell talking to the young people that they have got absolutely it's totally abstract to them, because they've not got that relationship that you were talking about. So and like you say, right, what can we do? I did the Sherry Waddell program at my parish just pre-COVID, and the big thing that came out of it was to have home groups like the Baptists, if you like. So, and not just in terms of Bible study, although that's obviously fundamentally what it does, but if you've got a network of home groups in the parish, you're creating a space where people can talk about the faith and their questions and doctrine and all different kinds of things. And that's one of the most beautiful things that comes out of. I'm part of a Baptist home group, and there's all kinds of discussions come out of it. But the other important thing that I wanted to say was, why is this now a problem and it never was a problem before? And this is the most interesting part. And I thought what was really interesting was that it was like we'd had a discussion beforehand. Obviously, I don't think viewers would recognise that, but that was how I felt, because Gavin, well, you've both really hit the nail on the head in terms of the importance of parents. And really, if we're catechizing anyone, forget the children, we should be catechizing parents. And why is that different now than it was in the past? And the reason really is because the way that Catholicism was transmitted before Vatican II was through devotion in the family. And that's all stopped. One of the terrible things that resulted from Vatican II was those devotions were virtually wiped out, and very few families pray the rosary together, study Bible together, have the saints' feast days, the things that we used to do that transmitted the faith osmotically, if like to your children, and learning the penny catechism. And so kids were prepared. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of adults, a lot of Catholics now are cafeteria Catholics. They don't believe in everything that the church teaches. They pick and choose what bits that they want their kids to be culturally Catholic like they are. And that's why you get that question, oh, little Johnny doesn't go to Mass anymore, can you fix it? And I've had that on numerous occasions. And exactly, my answer is exactly as you said. There's no way I can do it. If you can't do it at home, there's no way I'm going to be able to do it. But the real question is, does that parent really want little Johnny to be a committed Christian? Because if they do, then they would be living a Christian life and demonstrating how important those values are every day at home. And I think that the confusion in the church, so this is where I'm trying to bring it back to, is under Pope Francis now, we've got so much confusion about what we believe and what, he's constantly coming out with new things that he believes and saying it's not doctrine, but I believe, I'd like to think that hell was empty or whatever. It's just not helpful, because it's means that the faith as it's transmitted, lacks clarity. And if the bloke at the top doesn't even know what the church teaches, what hope is there for our confirmation children, you know? So that's why it's important that we're informed Catholics ourselves and that we understand what's important about our faith and we give that great gift to our children.
Yeah, I think definitely some program which gets the parents of the children who are in these classes having a parallel class or something within the parish is going to be crucial. I mean, even that.
If it's what they want, Catherine, I think that's the first question we have to ask. Is this what you want?
Why do they want their children to be Catholic if it's just cultural? And this is the thing I went to my priest and I said, look, it's quite clear that a lot of these kids don't want to be here. They're sniggering, they're laughing, they're rolling their eyes, they can't make the sign of the cross. When you question them and say, why are you here? They say, my mum made me. And I said, so we had a discussion and I said, you know, from my point of view, I think, well, just don't be here. You know, you don't have to be here. Oh, and the other thing is, so then children who really have those devotion, they know what the rosary is, they're praying the rosary with their family, they're saying grace before meals, there's prayers, there's family prayers, there's family prayers, all three of them. They're going to confession regularly. They have a genuine faith in God. Then they see these kids sniggering and laughing and they don't know how to do the sign of the cross, and they realise that this is seen as wacky and odd and crazy and weird. And so do we have concern for those young children who actually do have this and the influence of this? So you can look at it both ways. On the one hand, these kids can be a great witness to the faith for this large proportion who couldn't care less. But there's also the risk that this large proportion are a poor influence on those who do care. So I'm not totally sure, but I'm of the view that actually, why not use the classes to say, let's start from scratch. Let's just say, rather than some program that we've put together, come in, ask your questions, and let's just be on this journey where you're just really honest from the beginning. I don't believe in God. I don't know why I'm here.
That's how my course developed over the years. Was it stopped being like sacramental course and it got more and more like the Alpha course. You know, like this is the basics of why we believe in God and stuff like that.
Thank you both. I know time is short and we have other things to do today, but there's a lot more we want to discuss, and we want to come back a bit later in the week and talk about the DDF again, the DDF, Fernandez and Pope Francis's recent note on the sacraments, and a couple of other things besides. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Please, as I said, do like, share and subscribe. But for now, that's it, folks. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Mark Lambert, rushing off to Mass. Now late.
I'm Gavin Ashenden.